Well, good morning once again. This is a different format than maybe things you've seen at Living Word before. And just to kind of recap some of the words we just read from Matthew 23, 1 through 12, which says, "The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." Those words don't make sense in our world. Which says that people will exalt themselves by leveraging other people for their benefit, by propping themselves up behind facades, by gaining power to minimize others, and because they feel entitled. But I think we'd all agree that walking in humility is an organizational foundation to living our lives as Christians. This is the 7th installment of our series of Walking in Hope. I would encourage you to visit our website at livingwf.org to access the other installments. And we have an incredible opportunity as a Living Word Fellowship here to be walking in the midst of people who are living out those words. One of those people is our interviewee here today, Lois Holland. Pat and I have had the opportunity to know Lois for the last several years. She's a regular volunteer at Awana. She's always somebody that peppers her responses in the adult Sunday school class with wisdom. You know this is somebody who is not a slouch when it comes to knowing the Bible. She is an expert quilt maker. She's made probably dozens of quilts that a lot of us have enjoyed. She's a prayer partner. She's involved in a women's Bible study, and I believe your last name is Cook, Lois, your maiden name?
Yes.
And that really sets off another strong quality of Lois. She's an excellent cook and baker. After I got to know Lois, I began envisioning a service like this to interview her. So this has been on our minds as a leadership team for a while, and I'd like to introduce Lois as we set up this interview here. She and her husband, Al, had an opportunity from September of 1960 through July of 1977 to serve in the lower Brule Sioux Indian tribe area. This is in the southeast portion of South Dakota along the Nebraska border, along the Missouri River. Some of the images that you're going to be seeing are the first time that these images have been shown in several decades. Lois and Al received their education at the Eastern Bible College. They were originally seeking a mission in Africa. They were in their early 20s at the time. I see many of you about that age. Imagine doing this at that age. They went with about $80 in pledges raised. This was a mission through the Assembly of God Church, and the population of the Lower Brule was about 1,000 people at that time. They drove from the Newark area of New Jersey to South Dakota in a 1957 Chevy with a small U-Haul, and they drove and lived in a small 2-bedroom garage apartment that they rented for $75 a month in Chamberlain. They launched numerous ministries from the Lower Brule over their nearly 2 decades of service, and Lois had an opportunity to return there in 2014. Lois, can you tell us briefly how you came to faith and who were your spiritual mentors?
Well, my parents were both very active in our home church, and they both were Sunday school teachers. I was influenced by other Sunday school teachers and very much influenced by the missionaries who came to speak at our church. After they would speak in the service, they would come to our home for dinner and spend the afternoon, and then there was an evening service. But during that time, when we were waiting for dinner to go on the table, and after we consumed the meal, I would sit at their feet, and they would tell stories of what they did on the mission field. And at this point, I would like to just emphasize that a missionary's job is to take the hand of Jesus and take the hand of people that you're ministering to, draw them together. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. You're seeing a picture of me. Believe it or not, that's me and my husband and our 2 children. To get back to your question, the missionaries that we often had were from China and South Africa. There were those that were from other places, but these missionaries from those 2 places in particular influenced my life from a very early age. I loved all the stories they told, and their basic mission was the same as what our mission was when we went to Lower Brule, to take the hand of Jesus and draw it together with the hands of the people. We wanted to teach them how to walk with Jesus, and you have to hold his hand as you go through life.
Lois, you started attending Living Word in 2017, I believe. Can you tell us why you chose this church?
I tried 6 different churches. I visited several times. And I found that I fit in this group here better than I fit anywhere else. I could see areas where I could minister, and I also felt that I would be ministered to. And so, it sounded good to me.
When you traveled from the greater Newark area of New Jersey to the Lower Brule and you saw it for the first time, what were your reactions and what did you think the outcome would be?
My husband loved it from the first time he put his foot on the ground in South Dakota. Me, not so much. I hated it. I thought it was ugly, horrible. The picture you're looking at right now was the scene that met us on the first Sunday that we were there on the reservation. There had been a 2-story house in that location, and a 12-year-old boy had been playing with matches. The house caught on fire. Most of the people in the house were drunk, so they didn't get out of the fire. 12 people in all perished. And you can't tell this, but you can see there's a cross on the top of the bulldozed remains. At the base of that cross, there's an empty gallon wine jug. And that became the symbol of what our work was going to be as we went and followed the Lord's lead. As I told you, I hated it. I tried to bargain with God. Let us go back to New Jersey. We'll pioneer a church there. And for me, that was the last thing in the world I had ever wanted to do. But I was so desperate, I tried to bargain with God. He was just not cooperating. I cried for 3 days. I hated it so bad. And when I would go to the Bible to try to get some comfort, the only place I would wind up was in Genesis 1. And what God said after each thing that he created, you already know what he said. It was good. I did not agree. So the Lord had to deal with me. And the time came when I learned to love that area. And I learned to love the people. That was not hard to do. But the initial cultural shock was something else for me.
We can see from the pictures, this is a starkly beautiful, perhaps desolate place. How did the spiritual climate of the area match the landscape?
Well, I've already mentioned, now what you're seeing right now was the basic congregation that we met when we first went out there. And you're seeing the condition of the church building that we had to adapt to. Prairie sod floor, and it was very challenging. On Sundays, most everybody would be drunk. We'd pick up kids for Sunday school. What you're seeing now, we were sitting outside because there had been a flash flood, and the inside of the church was mud from the open door to the back side of the church. So there was no way we could conduct a service there. A couple of the men had pulled one pew out, and so that's how we had Sunday school. We often show this picture with the rainbow because the end of the rainbow was in Lower Brule. No pot of gold, but the gold was there in the lives of the people. And so we ministered to them.
Well, about 4 years into your ministry, around 1964, you had secured the land and the funds to build a new church. And you mentioned you established 2 Chronicles 7:14 as thematic and hung a plaque on the church proclaiming that verse. Some of you may know that verse, for if my people who are called by my name. I'm not going to go on with the verse. Why did you have that plaque hung on the wall, on the door to the church?
When we first went there was a nucleus of people who had come to know the Lord, maybe 6 or 8 of them. And what they expressed to us is they wanted their people to know a better life. They wanted them to have a better environment, a better culture. The Native American culture, in its purity, is so close to scriptural that it's amazing. But Satan, of course, had contaminated it. So they wanted a better education, better well-being for their people. Well, in order to get that, 2 Chronicles 7:14 gives you the recipe for that. Humble yourselves and pray. Seek his face. Turn from your wicked ways. Make changes. If you really want God and a better life, you have to make changes. You have to be willing. God is standing there ready to help.
Lois, you and your family ultimately moved from Chamberlain and onto the reservation in a parsonage in the mid-'60s. Can you tell us about some of the ministries that you launched from your home?
Just to clarify our living quarters, we started out in Chamberlain because at that time they were building the dams on the Missouri River, and the government agency that was doing this, the word will come to me probably 3 o'clock this afternoon, but anyway, you could hardly find a place to live. So when we got there, we found half of a two-car garage, and we rented that for $75 a month. We went from that location to a trailer in Reliance a couple years later, still too far away from Lower Brule, because that's how you could get any kind of living quarters. when they had established the new town, because they're going to move the entire community, including the graveyards, from where it was located right up against the river to further inland. So we moved our trailer to Lower Brule when they had established a trailer park there. A few years later, we moved into a 4-bedroom house that was a government project. And after that, we built a parsonage there. And that was our living quarters. As far as our responsibilities, Al and I divided to conquer. He became, of course, the preacher. But we did a lot of first aid because we were 32 miles away from the closest medical facility. And with all the drinking, there came also a lot of fighting, a lot of broken glass, carving up human bodies. Not pretty. My husband was very good in the area of stopping bleeding. The public health doctor that came twice a week, and if you got sick on any other day than Tuesday or Thursday, you would just have to wait until Tuesday or Thursday. Anyway, the public health doctor showed my husband how to properly clean a wound and how to stitch it up. I was glad I didn't have to do that. I did deliver 2 babies. He delivered a few more. But other than that, he saved many lives. Teenagers with overdoses. He'd drive 120 miles an hour to get them to the hospital to get help. So that was a large part of our ministry. Well, then, my husband also became the vet, because none of the cats and dogs on the reservation were vaccinated for anything. So he went to the tribal council and said, if you'll pay for the vaccine, I will do the vaccinating. And they agreed, and that was done. And it was renewed every year because there'd be new dogs, new cats that would come into the picture. Well, he also did the 1970 census on the reservation, and that was an adventure. He was the Boy Scout leader. He was a consultant for the police department. That means often the police, when they would be on their evening rounds, would stop at our house for a cup of coffee, and they'd bring the radio in. So I'd make the coffee, and I usually would have cake or a coffee cake or some kind of dessert. And those guys would sit and visit until they had a call, and then they would go wherever. What you're seeing now are some of the Boy Scouts. My husband was the Boy Scout leader. He also was the water plant supervisor to make sure that we had clean water on a regular basis. My jobs were Sunday school teacher, I created a story hour for 4- and 5-year-olds. The South Dakota Library Commission was setting up libraries on the reservations, and I became the librarian there. I'm not going to go into detail, but that was a very intensive project, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I taught women's Bible studies. I was on the alcoholism program. I had a group called Missionettes that was for little girls from 6 until 15. I raised money to take kids to camp. I put out a newsletter every other month so that people that had donated to the work there at Lower Brule would know what we were doing with their money. And so those are pretty much it as far as what we were doing.
Lois, over the course of our conversations this past week, we talked about many, many people that you impacted over the years. We're going to, for the purposes of this interview, we're just going to focus on 4 people: Norma Defender, Esther Quilt, Joe and Irene Skunk, and Silas Black Dog and his wife Julia. I realize there's many others. But first, can you tell us about Norma Defender, how you met her?
I met Norma through her reputation before I actually met her. Her reputation was that she set her house on fire with her 4 children in it. Well, that clearly indicated there was something seriously wrong. She wound up in the state mental health facility, and she was there for several years. So that's how I knew her, because of the story. And one evening, just before sundown, there was a knock at my door, and I answered it, and this young lady said, "I need a ride over to Grandma LaRush's. Can you get me there?" I said, "Sure." I got the car keys. I told my husband what I was doing, and this young lady got in the car. Well, we had a conversation on the way over to Grandma LaRush's, and I realized that this was Norma well, she wasn't Defender then, but I knew who she was. All of it, I put 2 and 2 together, and I thought, dear Lord, what have I got here? And so we went over to Grandma LaRush's, but we didn't get out of the car. We sat for 2 hours talking about her life and her desire to know the Lord better. I was kind of afraid. I slipped the car keys out of the ignition because I didn't want her to grab them and do what? Anyway, the police saw what was going on, and the reason that she had asked for a ride is she was not allowed to be out after dark. And so that's why she asked for a ride, and I didn't get the connection till after I was in the car with her. Well, anyway, everything went well. We had this good conversation. She proceeded to find her way to the Lord. Not until after we had left did she come to the assembly there. But now she's one of the most stalwart members, and she is a strong believer in the Lord and consistent in her life.
So we can never underestimate those backdoor conversations we might have with people. I think you'd agree, Lois? Yes. You mentioned Esther Quilt lived in squalor, extreme poverty when you met her. Can you tell us more about her?
Her family home was right across the street from where our church was. And on Sundays, once in a while, not on a consistent manner, she would sneak over. She was like maybe 9 years old when this first started, but she would sneak into Sunday school and listen. She's very timid, and you never knew what she was getting out of it. She did not communicate. But this went on over a period of years. When I took kids to camp, she never wanted to go. So, we ministered to her as much as we could, and as time went on, that's all we knew. She would come and go, ask questions, a little bit, but was very much in the background. Well, when I went back in 2014 and visited there, here's Ethel, one of the stalwart people in the congregation there. Totally different. No more timidity. She brings her grandchildren to Sunday school and church. She lives a consistent Christian life. I was amazed, and I was so thankful. I shed many tears on that visit because I saw the results of many hours, many years of just connecting people with Jesus.
That's an encouragement to us Sunday school teachers, Awana leaders, other people working with youth, those kids who may not be the ones who are really engaged on the sidelines. Think of the impact you might be having. Joe and Irene Skunk became your friends and trusted ministry partners during your time there. Can you tell us how this happened and a little bit about them, please?
The picture you're seeing right now is Irene Skunk. And as you can see, she was a humble servant. She would be there after services. This particular picture is after a Christmas program. And we'd have 120 people stuffed into that sanctuary. And after the program was over, there would be paper wrappings from Christmas presents all over the place. And so she and Joe would just get the rooms in the dustpan and start cleaning up. They had been there when we first came to the reservation. They had been part of the nucleus. And they just stayed with us through the years and were just so helpful. She always wanted to, we'd get boxes and boxes of used clothing, blankets, throw rugs, all kinds of household things. And she would know that there was a box in the post office before I would know what was there. And she would send a note by one of the kids, "Can I see what you got today?" And I've saved all those notes. Anyway, I had to be careful not to let her see everything and take the good stuff and leave the less good stuff for the other people. And I prayed and I said, "Lord, how can I handle this so that she's not offended and the others in the congregation would not be getting second hands, you know?" So the Lord showed me to put Irene in charge of letting the people know when I was ready for them to come and see what was in the boxes. And we would also get these 50-gallon drums full of good stuff. So anyway, I put her in charge of seeing that the other people knew that they could come on a certain day at a certain time, and they could take what they wanted. So that's mainly what Joe and Irene Skunk, they were just there to do whatever needed to be done.
The final person we're going to focus on, and really significant person in your ministry there, and I think you all will find this very interesting, is Silas Black Dog and his wife Julia. Can you tell us just a little bit more about them, please?
Silas is the man on the right. He was from the Rosebud Reservation, and he married Julia, who was the daughter of the last remaining chief among the Lower Brule Native Americans. Her father's name, and she is the woman on the extreme left. Her name, like I said, is Julia Black Dog. Her father was Two Hawks. And when he passed, she and her sister, who is the lady on the extreme right, Eunice, and they had a third sister, plus they had 3 brothers that I'm aware of. Anyway, they each got portions of land from their father's. It isn't really an inheritance. It is and it isn't, because you cannot own tribal land. And so Julia gave a portion of her land for us to build that initial church that had the sod floor. She gave that land. Well, when the government came in and built the dams, they gave us $10,000 for that pitiful building with the sod floor, which we invested in the new church building in 1964. So anyway, to get back to Silas, when we first went there, my husband had a camera, and he was taking pictures all the time, and he developed here you see Silas in his full regalia. Anyway, when we first went there, my husband asked Silas if he could take a picture of him, because he was a full-blood Sioux, Dakota. And he said, no, I don't want my picture taken. So we respected that and never asked again. But several years later, after he bought the whole outfit that you see on him, he came and asked my husband to take his picture. Well, now he didn't care if his picture went on a coffee can, which we would never have sold his picture to anybody. But anyway, that was the joke. Early, when we first went, he caused us some trouble because he didn't care if people came and had meetings there on the reservation, but the idea of setting up a church, even though his wife gave the property for us to build the church, he wasn't real happy with this. So he began some negative activities. It was difficult for us to find this out. However, all things work together for good. You keep treating them according to the Bible. Do what Jesus would do. There's a scripture in 2 Corinthians, and I'm not going to read it to you simply because of time element, but it instructs us that we are vessels of clay. And in those vessels of clay, us, we have, when we've heard the gospel and accepted it, we have the biggest treasure in all of creation. And it's our responsibility to show Jesus through our growth and development on this journey through life. It's our job to let Jesus shine through us. You're looking at Walter Sazoo and Alex LaRuche. When we lived in the trailer on Sundays, my husband would go and have meetings at Laura Ziegler's, and that's the house, Laura Ziegler's house. And he would have a devotional service there on Sunday afternoons. He would also go to 2 other, one was a trailer and another was another building, a home. And he would have a service there while I had Sunday school in our trailer. I would have about a dozen kids that would come. And so, at various times through those 17 years, we had to adapt to the circumstances around us. And that's what all missionaries have to do. They have to adapt and bring the gospel in its best form to reach the people that they're after.
Well, Lois, as we reflect on 17 years of ministry, how would you say God moved you to a life of humility? In this process, did you find hope, and has that continued throughout your life?
We had the hope before we ever left New Jersey. In our young years, we had planned to be servants for the Lord, and He took us at our word. We worked very hard. We faced a lot of negative things that challenged us greatly. But we knew that God had called us to that place. We knew that we were going to accomplish what He wanted us to accomplish. We had some ideas of our own, but God had a plan. And that's the same thing for every one of us. He may not call you to be a missionary to the Native American people, but He does call every one of us to follow Him. And He has a plan for your life. It's not going to be the same as His plan for my life. I'm at the end of my earthly life, and I look back and I thank God for what He has done for us, with us. Those years on the reservation were the hardest years, but they were the best years because we could see God working. Over and above the efforts that we made, we could see that He was accomplishing something in the lives of those people. Today, there is a strong congregation there. There are some people that we touched while we were there who are still on the outer circle. But God is faithful. I can't tell you what will happen this week down there, but I know that the gospel is still being preached there, and that the time that we spent there was well worth it. It was an investment that I am glad to have made, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, as we head into the Advent season, this message that we've in this interview is kind of a preface to Advent, our focus on Jesus, who was not only born into but was predestined for humility. Just think that God of all majesty and splendor chose to be born into a peasant class, whose mother, by maybe no choice of her own, was possibly illiterate. But now Jesus, His mother, and according to Matthew 23, all of us who follow Christ have an opportunity to be lifted up, to be held in honor. Each of us will have a choice as to how we are to order our lives when we walk out this door. And we hope some of the words that Lois shared this morning will resonate in your life and be an encouragement to you. Please join me in giving a hand to Lois for being interviewed this morning. You'll have an opportunity to visit more with Lois. She has a lot of educational materials out on the table there. She'll be back in the lobby to visit, and some of the items she has truly are collectible items. As our Pastor Scott has mentioned, we are forming a missions committee. We would like to be more active in getting more of a grassroots following from our congregation here in missions. And I think Lois is also going to be taking a leadership role in that, she's told us. So we'd encourage you to talk to us about that. That's going to be really exciting. And then consider if we were to invite you up here for an opportunity, similar to what we have with Lois, how would you speak out on God's behalf? What would you say about the God who's working in your life? So think about those things. So again, thank you for your attention. And I'll ask our ministry leaders to come on up again, and we'll proceed with the rest of our service.